Rod Woodward here, wired for sound in Macca, and Gary Marshall's all plugged in and representing the Bessicar Massive, which can mean one thing and one thing only. It is another installation of the Gimme 5 podcast. How are you doing, guys?
I'm not bad, pal. Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
What happened on the weekend?
Well, the Leopard Cousins 7-game unbeaten run came to an end.
Oh,
I know, on Sunday. Great game. 2-1 up at half-time. Succumb to a 6-4 defeat. A 10-goal thriller on Town Fields.
my goodness. They said it couldn't be done.
I know. Our keeper was missing. He had a poorly stomach, shall we say. So we had one of the lads went in nets, 5'8". He looked like Billy Casper from Kes, I'll be honest, most of the time. But that's what we're blaming it on.
Oh, well,
we'll be back.
Yeah, you'll be back. You'll be back. We won't labour that. We're going to accentuate the positive, which we always like to do on this programme. And this is a huge one for me. We love things Welsh, don't we, Gaz? And I think as weeks go by, you have been a closet Welsh fan for a long time. Honest with you. But today is the day to come out, because I don't even know where to start with our special guest today. I mean, it's almost as though one show is not quite going to do justice to his many, many talents. He's a composer, he's a musician, a multi-instrumentalist, he's a presenter, a broadcaster. He's just an all-round legend, and he's also a fantastic guy as well. I'm delighted to say that we are joined by the one, the only, Mal Pope is in the house.
Whoa! Come on, boys.
How are you, sir?
Oh, it's a joy to be a part of it. And Gaza, bore da, ti'n iawn? A bore ma?
Navi.
What? Hey? I think you taught me that. Elvis Cruddington taught me that, Mal.
Elvis. Where is Elvis these days?
Exactly. Where's Elvis Cruddington?
Strip it up. I don't know that. I don't know whether that's Bill and Ben or, something the Temptations used to sing in the background.
What's that mean? No star. Is that one? Is that Welsh?
Hey, that's good night. Thanks. See you soon then. Take care. Lovely to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well,
that's that.
I'm trying to think of the signs when I come into Wales on the motorway.
Yeah. Don't take them personally. We do love you, really.
By the way, I never used to pay to come in. It's just sneaking down past Boston Monmouth.
Did you? I always think of Bob Webb, the comedian. He's a Londoner, but he lives in Wales now. And one of the first gigs he did was up in North Wales, and he couldn't remember the name of the hotel, but he remembered that it had Gwesty in its name. So he gets up to North Wales and he's asking people, "Where's Gwesty?" And they're going, "That actually means hotel in Welsh, guys."
Let me write that down. Gwesty.
So he had to do a little tour of every North Wales hotel, and then eventually, and typically, the one he was working at was the last one he found. Typical Bob Webb. So you look like you're all geared up there, Mal. I mean, that's a positive recording studio, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's the shed, thank God for the shed over this last year, because everything stopped, didn't it? And I sort of put a recording studio in the shed, and then I've got a camera and all that. And I've been doing sort of like some radio broadcasts, trying to do podcasts as well, like all of us, just trying to chat to people, because you've got to do something, haven't you? I mean, we could just sit around and watch the telly, but as creative types, you want to do something, and it's been a godsend. It's been a real godsend.
Yeah, well, you're the last person in the world who would ever sort of rest on their laurels, and I can imagine you've been sort of supercharged in lockdown. Have you doing various things? And
yeah, it's been brilliant. In some ways it's been awful, obviously. Not being able to gig and not being able to go and see people. In other ways, though, would you boys be doing this today if we didn't have lockdown? It's forced us to be creative, to think about things, to upskill. I do a weekly podcast with a lad called Johnny Tudor. No, I'm thinking you probably know Johnny Tudor. He says he's mid-70s. I think he's lying. He tap dances every day, but he's gone from, catching a train to London to do one audition every month to doing auditions every day at home. He's got his lights, he's got his new sound, it's brilliant. It just makes you think, learning lessons even at our great ages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was serious, wasn't it? Sorry. Is this supposed to be a funny podcast, isn't it? I'm so sorry. And another thing.
I was looking at your CV. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, the thing that jumped out at me straight away was that you were the first artist signed by Elton for Rocket Records.
Yeah, well, it was a funny thing. I started writing songs when I was really young. I was about 9 years old. And my brother and his friends said, you should send these to a chap called John Peel on Radio 1. So I got to about the age of 12 and I didn't know who John Peel was because it was past my bedtime. Literally was past my bedtime. He started at 10 o'clock. So I made a tape and I sent it to just BBC Radio 1. And a couple of weeks later, we had a letter back. It was addressed to me, but asking my mum and dad, could they get in contact to see if I could come and do a session? So I did the session and they were fantastic. John Peel and a guy called John Walters, who's his producer. And they told everybody about the session. And we had a couple of offers. And John Walters said, there's two companies. He said, we really like Elton. We've known him a long time. There's another company. We think they're a bit fly by night, but we should tell you about it. They're called Virgin. And he said, so obviously, and because I come from a church background, the guy who sort of mentored Elton in these early days, a guy called Steve Brown, was in charge of the record company, and his dad was in the Salvation Army. So my mum and dad thought, well, that's that's good enough for them. I mean, they were not dead set against it, but obviously, a little town in Wales, both teachers, both involved in the church, me suddenly going to London, in sex and drugs and sausage rolls. And it was just a big step for all of us. But I suppose when you're 12 or 13, you just think that's sort of natural. You take it in your stride.
So you actually sent the tape into John Peel at the age of 12.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that it was my dad's old Philips tape recorder. So they actually they got the letter, which they thought this is going to be horrendous. They probably did it for a laugh, first of all, and they had to find a special tape recorder to play it, and they put it on. They went, oh. And they couldn't have been more supportive. I did about 3 or 4 sessions with John Peel.
Wow.
And, people at the same time, Paul Gambaccini was sort of just starting broadcasting on Radio 1. And I suppose it must have been unusual, terrifying for them to find this young artist. And I wasn't writing pop songs. I was writing, Simon & Garfunkel type of, deep and meaningless songs. So it was an amazing ride. And then to join Rocket Records, they'd actually signed. I think they'd signed. Actually, Kiki D was already there, because I remember the first day I went. They picked me up from Paddington Station in a white Rolls Royce and drove me to Wardour Street, 101 Wardour Street. We walked up, and on the back of their leather chair there was 514. I think was the number. It seems to stick in my mind. Was the number of singles that Kiki D had sold the day before, and they knew from that moment that Amoureuse was going to be their first hit. So it was me, Kiki D, and a band called Long Dancer, which had Dave Stewart in the band. Dave Stewart, who
Eurythmics. Right.
So it was a good, stable to be involved with. Although the career didn't really take off very, very much after that.
God, incredible.
Rod says he knows you from obviously signing for Elton John's label. I think I'm more interested in the Fireman Sam angle.
Well, the thing is, everybody knows Fireman Sam. It was weird because Wales had all this money to do S4C, the Welsh Fourth Channel. But obviously, if you're making programs in Welsh, particularly in those days, there wasn't a great market for them. And nowadays, you can do it. You can do like the Scandi ones, and you can sell them in Welsh and subtitled. But in those days, you couldn't. So cartoons was a brilliant idea because you can make them in any language. And I was living in Cardiff at the time. There were 2 lads called Hennigan and Lawson. They're like 2 mad professors, and they'd got the gig to write the demo for it. So I remember singing it in their bedroom, and their little studio in the back bedroom. And then I never thought anything more about it. Then, about 6 months later, they said, right, we got the gig. And we had a premiere and everything when it came out. It was terrific. But looking back on them now, I mean, they've gone CGI now, lads. You don't mess with a classic.
No.
And they've changed the song. But looking back, it was so incredibly well done. That stop motion stuff. The attention to detail. They were funny stories. John Alderton read them. And Elvis Cridlington was what his left hand man or his right hand man for Fireman Sam. And Fireman Sam was, he was a legend. He still is a legend.
Gently Bentley. I shall like that. Gently Bentley.
Yeah, naughty Norman Evans, and I mean, Rod, now I'm trying to think. Oh, what's the name? Bella Lasagna, who had
Bella Lasagna. Yeah, didn't he play Dracula?
So it really was Welsh Valleys. Have you ever been? Have you been up to the Valleys, Gaza?
Have I? I've been to Merthyr Tydfil. Is that in the valleys?
Well, you go through a valley up, you
Yeah,
do go through. I mean, the culture in them is fantastic. Rod, you've done all those clubs, I suppose, at one stage or another.
I've been up to Tonneref Isle and all that. Yeah. I think my first ever paid gig was Tonneref Isle Workmen's Club.
Oh man, we used to do the Mardy Workman's Hall, which is no longer there. You know, it was built by miners with their pennies, and they had libraries there, and they great centres of culture. But in the 50s and 60s, they had all these great bands. I think the Moody Blues had played there, and one of the down stages of my career, because it does go like that, doesn't it? I just had to make money, and we were going out and doing all the clubs, and the Mardy Workman's Hall was just we we doing a gig in the top room. They'd add us back to the top room. They sold it out, and halfway through the gig, the table started flying. So you keep on going, don't you? Keep on going, and at the end he said, "Sorry about that." He said, "Steroids." All around up here.
Well, you mentioned the Fireman Sam premiere, and I know you're a bit of a regular on the red carpet because there's a film about Swansea City, Gaz. If you haven't seen it, I mean, I'll get this out of the way early.
Yeah, Rod. But you're not interested in football, Rod.
From a Jack to a King, that had a London premiere, didn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it's still the highest grossing football documentary in British cinemas. Yeah, what a great ride. My partner in the film company is a guy called Ed Thomas, who designed Doctor Who. In fact, he's in Germany at the moment making a film with Steven Spielberg. It shows how people's careers go in different directions.
Wow.
And we watched the Swans, their amazing rise in the second amazing rise. Toshak did the first one, and then Brendan Rodgers finished it off second time around. And we were thinking we should be making films because we were doing quite a lot of film work in Swansea at the time with big American productions that Ed was working on. And we thought we needed this story in front of us, and it was an amazing story. And I suppose the decline after that is even more poignant, but it was great to be involved in it. We got a guy called Mark Evans, who he's made lots of films, House of America. We brought a really good filmmaker to direct it, and we had free reign from the club. We worked with the lads who had bought the club, and that is an amazing story. Now, a lot of people have criticised them for selling out to an American ownership. They were at the bottom of the football league. And these boys put £50,000 of hard-earned cash into saving the club. So in a way, they definitely paid their dues to make the club keep it alive. And then the journey up was just staggering. I mean, guys, would you have been aware of the Swansea rise at the time? Because we had a couple of Arsenal legends in the team.
Yes, Ray Kennedy.
Yeah, he was brilliant.
Tommy Smith came down.
Yeah. Tommy Smith. Do you know what? You're a big Tottenham fan in that case, aren't you, Gaza? You're going to love this one. I was on the North Bank. So was it the League Cup? It was maybe the replay at the Vetchfield. And Ozzy Ardiles and Villa were both in the Tottenham team.
Yeah.
And so we're all very excited. And so they kick off and the ball goes to Ardiles and Tommy Smith runs up to him. And there's a crack. It's just a crack. So that's the first sound. And the second sound is like 20,000 people in the Vetchfield going, and he was off. He was off within about 3 minutes. I mean, he was apparently Tommy was a bit upset about these foreign players coming over and taking our gigs.
that would have been Tommy, wouldn't it?
He would have been upset about many things, Tom.
Yeah, but he was brilliant. He was a brilliant footballer as well, Tommy Smith. Yeah. Ian Callaghan was what a gentleman.
Did Borsma come down as well? Phil Borsma.
Yeah, he used to work with Tosh, I think. Gary Stanley, I think, was from Everton. But that was great. But then the second time round, we had the Arsenal legend Leon Britton.
Obviously, learned everything from the Arsenal.
Yeah, the mighty Arsenal.
I tell you what, there was a player the second time round. He nearly finished Callum Chambers' career. Was it Jefferson Montero? Was he?
Oh, that game where he turned him inside out. You saw his intestines by the end of the game. He was.
The poor. Honestly, I think every Arsenal fan at the time thought we've got a player here.
Yeah.
And then Jefferson Montero just absolutely ruined him one afternoon.
And what is it with players like that? Jefferson Montero was a world beater. He was Alan Curtis, who we might talk about later. He talked about one player. He said, it was like you look out onto the drive and you've got an Aston Martin. But then a week later you look outside and it's turned into a Skoda. Sometimes they are absolutely stunning. Jefferson Montero, that game was unplayable.
He was unplayable.
And yeah, he destroyed somebody's career
He'll
almost.
still be having nightmares, Callum Chambers, about that game.
Yeah, but he could never play. He could never play a whole season. He'd be in for about 2 or 3 weeks.
I was going to see what happened to him. So,
yeah, he went to Birmingham, and I think he's gone back to South America now. Right. Yeah. He should have been. Well, he was brilliant, but not consistent. Bit like me, really. Brilliant, but not consistent.
So a Jack to a King. It's not quite in my top 5, but it's there or thereabouts. But speaking of top 5s, Gaz, you better explain the premise of this to Mal.
It's so simple. We've given Mal categories to choose. He's chosen 4. His 5th one has to be dinner guests. They can be dead or alive. Just a table, sit around the table with 5 people, past or present, just to chat with. Your 4 choices that you went with are artists or groups, films. Yeah. Footballers and sporting moments, which sporting moments I can't wait for personally. But anyway, we're going to start off with your artists or groups, your top 5.
Top 5. So I had to go for Elton John. He was my idol. He probably still is my idol. And it was incredible to be in that sphere of influence, because he was the biggest rock star in the world at the time. The first time I ever met him, because when I went up, it was I used to record in the school holidays, and my dad or my brothers would come up and chaperone me and stuff. So at the first recording session in October, he wasn't there, but I think it must have been November. He just come back from a 48-city coast to coast in America. He flew in and came straight in because me and my dad had to go back, because my dad's a teacher. He had school the next day, and I had to go back to school as well. So I just remember walking to 101 Wardour Street, up the stairs. There's a big Phantom 5 Rolls Royce outside, and I suppose I must have been precocious, but I met him for the first time. I couldn't say anything, and thank God my dad was there, Sunday school superintendent, headmaster. I just remember him talking to Elton about gardening. Elton John, pink hair, one of those big sort of butterfly chairs that he was just like, and I got him to sign every autograph book and picture and album and stuff. So Elton, but the music, I particularly those 70s years, he was just stunning. That work that he did with Bernie Taupin, those songs, they still stand the test, and the records sound great. And again, I had the chance to, my producer was Gus Dudgeon for a while, who produced, Space Oddity. He produced all those Elton John albums. And Gus was, again, a recording legend, because the sessions would go on all night. And again, I was a kid. But half the time he'd be telling stories to try and get the atmosphere right, to try and get the right sort of feel in the studio before you went in and made the record. And he was very serious in making the record. But, I was checking the date because I just wanted to make sure it was November the 28th. So I must have been in London recording with Gus Dudgeon. We'd had a long session ourselves, but we were waiting for some tapes to come in from America. And by the time they'd arrived, it was like 1 or 2 o'clock, and I fell asleep while Gus Dudgeon started mixing Elton John and John Lennon at Madison Square Garden. It's like, and I fell asleep. I mean,
wow.
I was 14 or 15 years old, so I don't blame myself. But, to have been in the room when that was happening, and that was it wasn't happening every day, because the great thing was, or the terrible thing from a career point of view, my parents were teachers, so they didn't let me do the whole stage school thing. I used to come back home. Within a couple of days, having told the stories, everybody forgot about it, and we moved on, and I was quite involved in football, so it wasn't like I was, I didn't get picked on in that sort of sense, because I was sporty as well. And but then, you'd go back, and then Christmas, you'd go to a Christmas party, and Elton would take me around with my autograph book to meet everybody. Ringo Starr. I remember he woke up Mickey Dolenz from the Monkey. He was flat out on a big set of cushions.
My favourite Monkey as well, that. Mickey
he was great, I remember going to meet Brian Ferry and Brian Eno. Brian Eno terrified.
Brian Eno, yeah.
Because his hair was all like that. It was the first time I've met lots of people since who wear makeup, but it was the first time I'd ever met anybody with bright red lipstick on. I got Brian Ferry's autograph, but I didn't ask Brian Eno. So it was just such an odd, as well as the parties, to be involved in those studio setups with these amazing musicians, and for it to be my first experience of making music in a recording studio. I was spoiled rotten.
The dog's a big Brian Eno fan, by the way.
Sorry, he hasn't forgiven me.
Yeah. I thought when your favourite monkey was Mickey Dolenz. Mine was Clyde from Every Which Way But Loose. But the other thing, Mal, with Elton, I mean, I watched that film Rocket Man, and that scene where he's having his music lesson in a sort of a conservatoire, and the teacher plays something, and then he gets up and he repeats it. I mean, he obviously had an incredible piano talent. He was a protege, wasn't he? He was a virtuoso as a youngster. I didn't realise he was technically that good, you know.
Yeah, and they always said rhythmically he was one of the best piano players, you know, rock piano players there were. You know, it was just so natural for him. How do those things happen? You're touched by God. It's like Paul McCartney, isn't it? You know, melodically. I mean, you know, the great thing was that meeting with Bernie Taupin. You know, so he went from writing, you know, songs which rhymed to songs which were lyrically were brilliant as well. You know, and it's funny how fate has those moments, isn't it? Because the letter did apparently, you know, it was there somewhere on the desk when they met Ray Williams from Liberty Music. Elton went in. He said, "Well, there's a songwriter here from Lincoln," you know, and sometimes things are just destined to be hits. There's a guy called Eric Weisberg, who was a guitar player, and I did a tour once with Art Garfunkel around Europe, and he came down for breakfast one morning, and he had a Bentley on his badge on. So talking about cars, and he got all the different car pictures that he bought, and he told me how dueling banjos had become a hit. He was asked did he know a song called Devil's Banjos? He said, yes. He was asked to go down to the Deep South to record something, did it again. A year later, he's in the studio, and somebody said, I heard your record this morning. And Eric's a big Jewish guitarist, you know, what record? And he said, that dueling banjos thing. You know, and 6 weeks later, it was #1. And it was actually just a demo record for the film. So some things are just destined to be hits. Like Give Me 5. You can't fight it, boys. Just ride this to the top.
I'll tell you what, when we get to like maybe 44 subscribers, we're going global, mate. We are going. So we've got Elton John #1, #2 on your list, Mal.
Randy Newman. I love Randy Newman. You know, Elton John.
Toy
Story.
Yeah.
You know, everybody thought Elton John was going to be Randy Newman, just sat at a piano. But when he started jumping about and wearing funny clothes, but Randy Newman, he's just incredibly talented. You say Toy Story, but then you think of all his back catalogue, you know, Short People. He's incredibly incisive. So the difference between him and Elton is that he writes his words as well. So Short People, which, you know, nearly got him, you know, people wanted to kill him because they thought he was against short people. It wasn't. I once saw him on the banks of the Mississippi River. It was Memphis in May. I was out there doing some musical stuff, and I got tickets to Memphis in May. And he was there. It was a sunny afternoon, just him and a Hawaiian shirt and a grand piano, and he's singing a song called Rednecks. Now, if you listen to the words of Rednecks, there's a lot of words that, you know, parental guidance you wouldn't use normally these days, but he's using them for great effect about how rednecks view life. And so it's not particularly positive about being redneck. And I'm sat there with the boys from Mississippi, you know, who have all got very red necks. As he sings it, they're all going, yay! Realizing that he is actually taking the mickey.
No sense of irony.
No, just, you know, his words are great, and then you think about those films that he's done since. You know, I played Toy Story to my granddaughter the other day, and she's dancing around. But there's so much. Well, he comes from a great family of music writers, isn't it? I think his uncle wrote the theme.
Oh, did he?
And then Thomas Newman, I think, is a nephew. You know, who's done all the Road to Perdition and all those.
Yeah.
As well. So I just love him. I just think his sardonic humour.
Brilliant.
There's an acidity in there as well as the sweet tunes.
Well, number 3 on your list?
Number 3, The Beatles. The Beatles.
I put it on just
Thank
about
you very
spot of
much.
the list. I thought I'll bang it in.
Yeah. Again, you know, how those things happen. That meeting Lennon and McCartney, and you know, it's like sometimes the stars all around, you know, align. That meeting and those songs, because they're, you know, the songs they gave away are just, you know, enough to make a career from. the melodies. And I've been watching a couple of documentaries. I'm really looking forward to the Peter Jackson one that apparently is coming out later, either this year or early next year. You know, they went through so much, that whole thing of becoming worldwide stars, and then their journey, and John Lennon's journey, you know, because the stuff they would do with Yoko Ono at the time, everybody laughed, you know, the bedding for peace and all that. But actually, they were really trying their best to use their celebrity status to make a difference in the world. And all the things they struggled with, you know, because when you are a worldwide superstar, I used to see it a bit with Elton, you know, because he might not have changed, but the whole world around you does change. And people don't ever treat you normally. You know, you can't be normal if you're a superstar. And it sounds like you're making excuses for them, but people do treat you differently. So having to cope with that as a normal human being, I think they did pretty well, really, particularly Paul McCartney. You know, the way he's managed to bring up his kids and to survive and to still write music.
So, yeah. He seems like an all-round good bloke to me, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Good choice. Well, no one can argue with the Beatles, but your number 4 is
Simon and Garfunkel.
A bit of insight here as well, having toured with Art.
Yeah, I think it's Never Meet Your Heroes. Actually, it was great. It was great to go on tour with him. That was the music that was really influential when I was writing songs. My brother had the first stereo, I think, in the street. You know, and so when he was out, I used to put his records on, sit between the speakers. And a Baby Driver, the record would go from one side to the other. So I always loved them. And then I got the opportunity to go on tour with him. And even at, he must have been in his 60s by the time we were touring, his voice was just stunning. And those songs, I mean, I suppose the interesting thing for him is that he was still singing the Simon and Garfunkel songs, whereas Paul Simon had a whole new catalogue of songs. But again, the mixture of words and the melodies. But again, like Sound of Silence, they'd recorded it, just acoustic guitars and stuff, and it wasn't going anywhere. And somebody, a producer back in New York, put on bass and drums and guitars, and it became a hit. You know, and that really, you know, I'm sure they would have broken through eventually, one way or the other. But it is funny how little twists of fate can make careers or break careers.
Yeah. That was a bad falling out, wasn't it, between them? I mean, Paul Simon, because he wrote everything, didn't he? And
yes,
I think because Arthur got that fabulous voice.
Yes,
people liked Art Garfunkel more than. Honestly, it was hard to watch. To be fair, I've seen some documentaries about it. It's hard to watch.
Yeah. I mean, again, you know, it's hard to feel sorry for him because he makes millions every year from the royalties. Yep. And I mean, he was a hard taskmaster for his band. He had an incredible band. Steve Gadd on drums, Eric Weisberg on guitar from Dueling Banjos. A guy called Warren Bernhardt was his piano player, who was the MD for Steely Dan. And I remember we did this tour of Germany. We did a couple of tours, but one was in Germany. It was in the summertime, and it was all these sort of amphitheaters. I think Hitler had built them, and I think the Soviets had used them. And then in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, they turned into rock venues in the summer, so for gala events. And they were fantastic. And the German audience were great because they were kids and grandparents. They just seemed to love music. It didn't seem to be quite so categorized as it maybe is in the UK. But one afternoon, he suddenly decided that he didn't like Bridge Over Troubled Water being in the same key as it had been for the previous 50 years or however long. And halfway through, he wanted to put a key change in.
As you do.
So for a whole hour, he got the band to practice this key change halfway through. And they've mastered it. I mean, it's not easy if you're used to, you know, they're great players, but it's like a mental thing. And at the end, he said, "Nah, keep it as it is." And you couldn't help thinking that maybe he enjoyed that sort of experience with other musicians.
Brilliant. So your final choice on the artists or groups?
Dusty Springfield. I mean, this was a hard choice because I love so many American artists, you know, like the Detroit Spinners and all the Philadelphia sound. But Dusty had that voice. You know, she was blessed with that voice. She came from that almost like a folk singing tradition with the Springfields, but it was always the voice. And you know, there are great singers I'm not sure if you've seen the documentary. Is it 20 Feet from Stardom or something? You know, a lot of backing vocalists have got amazing voices, but you need the voice that everybody recognizes. And that, you know, Dusty, how what a great name for that voice. And the way that she moved then to all those American sessions, those great songs. And, you know, the songs are built around her voice. And again, you know, an incredible life. I keep on saying the word Elton John, but no, Elton John was a massive fan of hers and got her to sing backing vocals on some of his records and would have supported her. But, you know, being gay, and being gay as a woman was maybe even harder than being gay as a man in the industry. You know, it was. Has it ever been accepted but it is now, thank God. But you know, she had a tough ride. But I suppose a lot of that angst then comes through the voice. You know, you can't. Experience is the most expensive thing in the world, isn't it? It costs a lot of money, a lot of emotion to go through all those experiences. And I just loved her voice, still love her voice. The songs are terrific. And I mean, the list, it's not fair, boys. It wasn't fair just to choose 5, was it?
I know.
But,
It's just,
you know, I needed to make sure I had one female artist, so I chose Dusty. But you know, that list could have been 100 long, really.
Brilliant. Your next. To set this Gimme 5 podcast best onto the scene. A podcast never best onto the scene. Your next category is films.
Yes.
Top 5 films. 5, not 50. Mal.
Yeah.
5 films.
Yeah, I put the Bonds in because basically they're all the same, aren't they? You know, I tried to watch Tenet the other day. Have you seen Tenet?
oh,
No,
it's
I've heard.
Christopher Nolan, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like his James Bond film. And I admit, after 10 minutes, I'd been on Wikipedia trying to work out what's going on. I tried to read. I hadn't a clue. With James Bond, it's so simple.
Yeah.
You know, even if it doesn't make any sense. So a lot of these films are actually family related.
Yep.
I mean, I could go through them quite quickly if you didn't mind. The Bond films, all of them. Now, when I said the Bourne trilogy, I actually changed that afterwards because Bourne trilogy, Die Hard, and Lethal Weapon. There are certain films that when they come on the TV, you have to watch them.
Yes.
You've watched them a million times. And the Bourne trilogy, Die Hard, and Lethal Weapon are 3 films sets of films I always watch with my boys. Both of them live in London now. But, you know, come Christmas, on they go. Well, I suppose The Godfather is very similar to that as well. I've seen them all a million times. You know, you go to bed, you switch the TV on, The Godfather's on. You know, even Godfather 3.
Yeah.
You've got to watch it to the end. So maybe I can save you some time there. The Bond films, the Bourne trilogy, Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Godfather. I put those down as just 3 films.
That's fair enough.
That's fine. You make your own rules up, Mal.
It's a Wonderful Life. Have you seen it?
I love it. I've got it,
we've got a mate of mine he loves the podcast. I think it's his favourite film of all time. Andy Wood absolutely loves It's a Wonderful Life. Myself, not so keen.
Not so keen. Wow. Oh man, it's a classic. One year they started showing it in cinemas, and the kids bought me tickets to go and see it. But they always know there's one point when Zuzu's petals are in his pocket and he's coming home, having been saved by what's the angel called? Anyway, he grabs for this sort of like round circle thing on his on the stairs going up, and it comes off. And when he was dead, it didn't come off, and he knows that it's happening. And I'm looking at the cinema, and all my kids have just turned around and looking at me. Come on, right, cry, because we know you're going to cry. And then he's the richest man in Bedford Falls. Oh, Gazzy, you're heartless.
I don't like getting told it's an absolute. This is a classic. No,
it is a classic. It is, Gaz.
Stop it! Oh,
but
there's got to be some Welsh people in this, surely. There must be some. James Stewart Welsh. He's from Pontypandy, wasn't he, James Stewart?
Pontypandy.
He's related to Elvis Cruddington.
I'm going to make your day, Mal, and because I know, you know, obviously you're a Bruce Willis fan because you like the Die Hard and you love It's a Wonderful Life. But I can amalgamate the two for you because the Moonlighting Christmas episode, circa mid-1980s, It's a Wonderful Job. It's based on it. It's got Bruce Willis and it's got It's a Wonderful Life. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
Again, they said it couldn't be done, but it has been done.
I love moonlighting. The thing is, with once they got together, it ended, didn't it? Once they
it did. Yeah.
Got together.
And I always had a thing for Sybil Shepherd. She was.
Yeah.
Her and Jan Francis were my two crushes when I was.
What can you say if I told you these were what's it called?
Friends.
Good Friends.
Yeah, just good friends.
Oh, Jan Francis was my go-to.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah.
Her and Sybil Shepherd.
We're of an age, guys. We're
Exactly.
of an age.
You were right though in that, once they got together, that the chemistry was sort of gone, wasn't it? In a sense, and I guess that's why DSR can't ever get it on with Kate Fleming.
Yeah, never the same. I mean, they said that about Gaza and Rod. If they ever got it together, ruin the podcast.
He's been trying for years, man. I'm playing hard to get.
Hey, wait till the last episode of the series.
It's a wonderful podcast.
So we've got Bond films, and you've got, of course, this film, the Bond, the Bournes, the Die Hard, the Lethal Weapon, the Godfather, It's a Wonderful Life, and your last choice,
Sound of Music.
Oh yes, another good one, isn't it? You can't argue with that. That is just,
It is it's perfection, isn't it?
Perfection.
It's got Nazis and singing nuns. It is, I've just no, it's actually not recently become a grandfather, but I'm a granddad for the first time. So a little girl, she's 2 in June. So we're starting to go through all the classic. The lovely thing is she's not into Beyonce or Elton John. She's into 50s American musicals. So every time she comes around, we have to listen to the soundtrack of Singing in the Rain. Oh. And I've just moved her on to Sound of Music, Doa Dear and all that. So we sing the songs together. But it's made me go back and look at it. And it is film and musical perfection. The songs are brilliant. I mean, the story is what it is. And the arrangements are just terrific. I mean, Julie Andrews is wonderful.
She was made to play that part, wasn't she? Really?
Yeah, the choreography, the way it looks. The Salzburg looks fantastic, and it's set. It's singing nuns and Nazis. So boys, come on.
When you watch those old musicals, though, I mean, a lot of them were done in 1 or 2 takes because of the scale of the whole thing. The MGM ones, especially with the Gene Kelly set pieces and the Donald O'Connor running up the wall and all that sort of stuff. How on earth did they do those things? It was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, and again, Singing in the Rain, that is just wonderful. There's Uncle Good Morning, the whole day through Good morning, nothing could be better than Louisiana in the morning. And how? Because they can't be singing and dancing at the same time, can they? But they look as if they are, and the choreography is just staggering. I mean, I try my best in the kitchen when we do something. My granddaughter's pretty impressed. But
the Sound of Music, right? Is one, and I'm sure because I don't find being thicky. The children in the Sound of Music.
Yes.
Did any of them go on to bigger things?
Not
any
really.
of the children?
No, I think they've they do these occasional sort of meetups, and none became teachers and stuff like that.
I thought about Nicholas Hammond, evidently.
Oh, that's something Ian Parsons has popped in.
Yeah, he loves all this. That's why I thought I'd do it.
Nicholas.
He pops up, Nicholas Hammond. Still don't know him.
That's just a random. He's got nothing to do with the Sound of Music.
This is.
He's at the door.
Children.
He's at the door. That's right.
He's got a pass.
That's my ring doorbell. Sorry, it's not Ian Parsons.
My ring doorbell tends to go off at the most inopportune moments, Mal. And literally last week when I was having a prostate examination, and that is true. The timing was unbelievable.
On the podcast?
No.
I'm sure I missed.
That's what we need to do.
I missed the prostate. I missed that episode.
Live.
It's a good one. It went out after the watershed, that one.
Yeah. Gas has got a hand in everything these days, right?
We need Martin Tyler to say, "Welcome to Rod's Prostate," and it's live. So we've got the Bond films, we've got the trilogies, we've got the Godfather, It's a Wonderful Life, The Sound of Music. Now we're going to move on.
Okay.
Your top 5 footballers of all time.
The footballers of all time. Actually, do you know? I just remembered I missed the Charles brothers. All right, sorry.
I bet Nicholas Hammond's in there.
Yeah. Right. Pele.
Yep.
1970 World Cup finals. That whole I think I probably could still name the Brazil team. So I was 10 years old. Felix in goal. Anyway, I won't do it now. But he was just wonderful, wasn't he? He was just so classy. The way he controlled the ball, and they just the shirts they wore. It was everything I wanted to be from there on in.
That Brazilian kit in '70 was it was a thing of beauty, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jairzinho scoring every game. Yeah. Carlos Alberto coming in, scoring that wonderful goal in the final. I mean, it was tough because I was brought up in a little chapel, and Sunday night kickoff must have been 7 o'clock. Gospel service doesn't finish till 7. I'm looking at the clock and thinking, me and my brother, we can run home now. The preacher went on 10 minutes afterwards, and then we had to run home as well. It's just like, but it was worth it when we got there, 4-1 against Italy. And the thing is, I didn't realize how good the Italians were. Playing their type of football, because the Brazilian football was so sparkling, and so I always wanted to be Pele. Obviously, we're similar. We both retired now. that's the only similarity. Brilliant player.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2 on your list.
Right, I'm going to move him up actually, George Best, because George Best was the glamour boy. He appeared to have it all. I can't believe he was so young when it all ended. They used to kick lumps out of him. It was a very different game in those days. Kick lumps out of him. The pitches were dreadful, and he still managed to do all that magic. And his lifestyle as well. Again, when you're 9, 10 years old, that's what you want to be, isn't it? I remember buying Goal magazine. My brother had been away on a school holiday. It was the first edition of Goal, and he was I'm pretty sure he was on the front cover. The first thing was my brother, at the station, I got this. It was our whole lives. Football was, and it was so. It was sort of distant, wasn't it? Because it wasn't on all the time. It was just the FA Cup final day, which we always talk about at our age. But
brilliant.
All that used to be. It was so inaccessible, but you could look at your stars. So George Best, and the way he played the game, and his swagger. His arrogance. His arrogance.
He's another one of those guys touched by God, like an Elton John or a Mozart. They don't seem to put any effort in, and yet it just happens.
It's time, isn't it? They got time on the ball. They got time on the keyboard. It's that whole thing about time seems to stand still with master craftsmen. Yeah. Hold on, if we could we all just stop for a second? Just like this podcast, you seem to have time in between sentences, and he was like that, and he was. I mean, what a sad. But again, if he'd lived to be a fat old man of 80, would we be looking at him in the same way? Marilyn Monroe, when the great are taken as youngsters, you just still remember them as being those golden years.
Yeah. And he's a superstar that you could actually shake hands with. I mean, he's like, you can't see, like doing the after dinner circuit like that George used to do, and him being like you say, an absolute superstar. The players of today, that will never, you'll never go to a dinner with Lionel Messi or Ronaldo or Zidane.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've said this before. I worked with him in Hull. I've only worked with him once in Hull, and he got a standing ovation as he entered the room, and I've never seen that before or since, unless the MC have asked for it. But he just walked in, and 300 blokes just stood up and gave him a standing ovation to the table. Never seen that before. Never seen it since.
Wonderful.
Yeah. That's and I suppose how lucky you guys, because to meet your idols.
Yeah.
And I got a feeling that very few of them have let you down.
And no, exactly. And it was the worst thing. It was the day after the semi-final of the 1999 FA Cup when Ryan Giggs scored that goal. So of course he was wallowing in it. To be fair, George.
Yeah.
That was the day that Dennis Bergkamp got Alex Ferguson knighted. Missing that penalty. That'd have been the treble, you see.
Yeah. No, that goal again. Ryan Giggs. He's not on the list.
I can't watch it again. I've seen every time it comes, I have to turn it off. I can't watch that again.
Oh, it was an unbelievable goal, but
I can't remember it. No, I didn't say it.
That hairy chest. Good.
Yeah.
I can't remember it, man. No idea.
It was Best-esque.
No idea. I've got a clue. Number 3 on your list, Mal?
Johan Cruyff.
Oh, what a player.
Yeah. I went on a school holiday to Holland, And I remember going in, so, because football is our whole lives, I wanted to buy, I think it actually was the Dutch version of Gold magazine. I saw it there and I was going to take it home as a present for my brother. And the guy behind the counter obviously heard that we were British. And he said, so who's the best player in the world? And I said, Georgie Best. No, Johan Cruyff. Never heard of him.
Where's he from, this fella?
He's from Abertrudu.
Oh, Johan Cruyff.
Johan Cruyff. So the name obviously had rung a bell. And then by 1974, the World Cup finals. The Cruyff turn and all of that. Again, it's the swagger, it's the arrogance, it's the time of the ball. So I'm watching the 1974 World Cup final. Holland take this amazing early lead, and of course the Germans grind it out. By the second half, again, I think it must have been a Sunday night. By the second half, I go into the kitchen at halftime, find my Johan Cruyff Puma gold boots, and I wear them for the whole of the second half, watching the World Cup final. What an idiot! But, we had Geordie Cruyff was a player, and he was a very good friend of Martinez, who was the Swansea manager, Roberto Martinez. So he used to come to Swansea a little bit as well. So there was we felt we even in this part of the world, the Cruyff magic had sort of been passed down blessing to blessing.
You can see how what a hell of a player he is. If you go on the memorabilia sites now, the Johan Cruyff signature is worth a fortune. Just so you know. Right. Honestly, it's one of my best mates is a massive Cruyff fan, and for the last few years I've been trying to get him something signed by Cruyff, but it's more than 40 quid. I ain't paying more than 40.
He's a friend, but he's not that good a friend.
Oh, Christ, no. Honestly, if you look at if you've got a memorabilia for Johan Cruyff signatures, if it's less than like £200, it's probably going to be dodgy. These are all huge prices for a hand-signed Johan Cruyff photo.
Can I put that into some sort of perspective? I've just released a new single, lads, called A Child's Prayer. And I thought the idea would be that I do a new version of it, and I would find the old record that I made in 1977 with Elton John producing at Abbey Road. Not that I want to drop names. I'm sure I've got a copy of it somewhere. I'm thinking, somebody's thrown it out. I had to go on eBay and buy it.
No.
That's bad enough. The bad news is it cost me £5. I mean, I think it's dodgy. I don't think it can be a real one.
It can't be a real one.
Oh, I don't think so.
Hockey Malpope. It's ridiculous.
It's a knockoff.
Number 4 on your list, Mal?
Right. Now I'm going to have to be careful now here. I was going to go for the ex-Arsenal legend, Leon Britton, who was a fantastic player. And I'm going to go for Alan Curtis. Okay. They say never meet your heroes, but Alan Curtis, I would say, has become a friend. Now, it's hard because when someone has been such an idol for you, and I used to go and watch him at the Vetch when he was a young player, because the lovely thing about the first Toshak team that did the trip to the top, a lot of the team were local boys. So, I played a bit. Talk about it too much, captain of Swansea schoolboys. But in my schoolboy side, we had Jeremy Charles, called Russell Coughlin, who went to play for Blackpool, came to play for the Swans eventually. But you could as that team grew, Robbie James, I played against Robbie James. On the North Bank, you would see people that you'd played with in school teams. Now Alan Curtis came from the Rhondda. So Tom Pentra, top of the Rhondda. Anyway, his uncle captained Manchester City. When they won the FA Cup final in 1954 and left the FA Cup somewhere in the back seat of his car in the Rhondda overnight with the windows open. Which is a true story. Anyway, but Alan Curtis, he was just, to see him going down, he used to drop his shoulder. You knew it was coming. They must have known it was coming. And he'd be away. And as well as that, it was just a great shot. And he had a great relationship with Jeremy Charles, a guy called Robbie James, who went to Arsenal, actually. Went to Arsenal for a couple of weeks and was homesick and came home.
We can do that to players, you see. We can do that. I think we're going to do it to Willian as well. Let's see.
And so Alan Curtis, and again, the first game in the Premier League, playing against Leeds, a team that had let him go. he scored a wonderful goal,
Yeah.
and dropped his shoulder, beat Trevor Cherry. As he says, he had the tightest shorts on. They split when he scored the goal because he jumped up. He said, and I ran. He said, if the gates hadn't been locked, I'd have run down the Mumbles Road. It was just, and he said he's a top guy.
Yeah.
He's very funny, and loves talking about football. So when I do see him, I start talking about football. I think, no, leave him alone.
And a lovely, lovely man as well. Met him a couple of times. He's a lovely fella.
Top guy.
Well, I'll definitely give you that, because he went on to become a bit of a Cardiff legend, and it takes a bit of doing to come from Swansea to Cardiff, doesn't it, and be accepted. But 125 appearances, I think 10 goals for them. So, yeah.
As he said, when he played against Swansea for Cardiff, it was the only time he's been booed by both sets of fans.
You didn't get him in your Ayatollah video, did you?
I didn't get him in there.
No, I don't think so.
He loves the Bluebirds. He loves the Bluebirds.
Yeah, it's good.
As we all do.
Well said.
Final choice of your footballers?
Yeah. You get used to this. The Curtis brothers, not the Curtis, the Charles brothers.
The Charles brothers.
John and
Mel.
Charles. I was just sorry. I know I changed it last minute because Mel, obviously a big star at the Arsenal.
Yeah, Mel.
Mel Charles.
I've actually got a signed photo of Mel Charles.
Have you?
Yeah, I've actually bought one last year.
Oh, well, I mean, again, so the lovely thing about being in a team with Jeremy Charles was that at some games we'd have Mel and John Charles at the side of the pitch. Now, John Charles, again, I never saw him play. I've only seen the black and white, videos of him. I've heard him singing. He made records. The fact that the Italians and Juventus still, rate him as being, the gentle giant. Yeah. But two unassuming boys, they'd be at the side of the pitch. So what happened one year, there must have been a teacher's strike, and we had a great football team. The teachers weren't allowed to take the football team. My dad was a headmaster, so had the authority to be in charge, but he was about 5'6", and so we'd have Mel at the side of the pitch coaching the team, and then sometimes his brother John would turn up as well. We had won the game before they kicked off, because the other boys would see the Charles brothers and Jeremy Charles on the pitch, and it was like almost game over. But I remember Mel saying to me, "No, Malwyn," he used to call me Malwyn. He said, "No, we're jumping in. Jockey him now, jockey him. Yeah, jockey him." Right now, jockey him. So, and then you look at those, we talked about Pele, and I suppose one of the things about Pele I love is that he played against Wales, in the 1958 World Cup finals. Apparently, the player of the tournament from Wales' point of view wasn't John, because he got kicked to pieces, but it was Mel.
Really?
And Mel, he made one little slip, and he said Pele was a 17-year-old, flash, and he said he miskicked it. He miskicked it. Pele miskicked to score the goal that beat Wales. At the end of the match, they swapped shirts. So the first shirt that Pele ever scored a goal for Brazil in the World Cup went to Mel Charles.
Oh, wow.
Years later, Mel's, I think he's playing for the Mile End pub, who have no football shirts. Mel says,
"No,
I got a pile of shirts we can use. Somewhere in Swansea is Pele's first World Cup scoring shirt."
That just makes me...
Mel, what a schoolboy error that is.
Oh, yeah. I feel nauseous just thinking about it.
Well, Steve Hodges got the Maradona one, the Hand of God. Steve Hodges got that.
Wow. 40 quid on eBay?
Fortune. It's in the museum. Yeah. Probably with a fortune, that.
Isn't it? Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
But Pele's first ever goal that he scored for Brazil.
Yeah.
What would that be worth?
17 years old. Wow. So,
I'd be inclined to think that it would have had a wash, but for the fact that you said, it's up in the darkest part of the valleys. Maybe it's still in...
Who knows where it is? I got a feeling it's probably, somebody ripped it up for cleaning. I don't know.
Cleaning windows now, that, wasn't it?
It's a film waiting to happen, isn't it? Pele's shirt. It's like, it's a film waiting to happen, boys. Come on, write it.
It's a great one.
Rob.
I like that.
I feel it going on, this one.
This afternoon. I'll do it this afternoon.
So we're going from I mean, by the way, the John Charles, by the way, I met John Charles 4, 5, 6 times.
Right.
you never realised what an absolute legend he was. He was just like I say, a very unassuming, but a giant of a man, but so unassuming.
Yeah.
Because I met him, because I'm a Leeds legend. Many times he was sat on the top table that I was speaking at. And Bradford Park Avenue he was a guest one. Probably the last time I saw him was a guest at a Bradford Park Avenue dinner. And it's one of them things. Why didn't I get his autograph?
Yeah.
Why didn't I get his autograph?
Yeah.
What a balloon!
Yeah.
And he never played for Swansea. He was in that. It was a great time for families. It's almost like one little street. There was the Allchurch brothers, the Charles brothers. They all came from the same part of town.
Just amazing.
But there was a Leeds scout who spotted him and took him away. So he never played for Swansea, whereas Mel did, and then went to Arsenal, and then had that sort of career as well. So.
I mean, you think of all the great double acts. I'm talking Stan and Ollie, Abbott and Costello, Little and Large, Cannon and Ball, Hale and Pace, Zig and Zag, Mike and Bernie Winters, the Crankies, the list goes on. And Gary and Rod, they're just not them, are they?
Right, so we've gone from footballers to sporting moments.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's got a bit of a Welsh theme.
It's a very small world I inhabit. Okay, got to So, my first sporting moment, Swansea versus Northampton Town.
Obviously.
Saturday, the 30th of September, 1969.
So I'm getting a bit of interference here.
Sorry about that. I've got a programme. Here it is. Swansea versus Northampton. Yeah.
Look at that.
So this was the first match I went to see.
Oh, brilliant.
I was 9 years old. The reason we went to see it is because, and I'm not sure how good the cameras are. Let's have a little look, see if I can find it. Hold on a second. So it's a proper program. The schoolboy page. So that is my schoolboy team.
Really?
And we were all given tickets to go and see the Swans. So we all went down, all together. And we might have gone for egg and chips beforehand in Kay's Cafe. I think we might have got to the game. And just the noise. You're a kid. It's like you. And Frank Large. Do you remember Frank Large? He was a centre forward born in Leeds, signed for the Cobblers on the 20th of August 1969 from Fulham. Third spell at Northampton. So it actually ended. I think it was 2-0 at the 2-2 at the time. And Frank Large kicked the ball. It goes into the crowd and hits a kid. Knocks the kid over. Guy comes out of the crowd and goes to hit Frank Large. Frank Large knocks him out and is sent off. I'm thinking, if this is football, I'm coming next week. I got to pay for a ticket. It was just
Cantona at this game as well.
He put Cantona to shame because he actually hit him. I mean, he really did. It wasn't like one of these joking kicks. This was on the pitch, and he got sent off. It was
wow.
And we won 3-2. And I thought, if this is what football's all about, I'm going to come next week and I'm going to buy my own ticket.
I love that. And, if your name is Frank Large, you've got to have that in your armoury, haven't you?
Frank Large.
Frank Large.
Giving it Frank Large.
Yeah, shocking blonde hair he had. It was a great game as well. 3-2 we won. So there we are. That was my first really big sporting moment. Next one, actually, Wales versus Brazil in the 1958 World Cup. I'll put that one in next. When we made the film Jack to a King, we did a lot of research about the old Swansea way of playing football because there was a lot of Terry Medwin, Cliffy Jones, all Swansea boys, all in that team. John Charles, Jack Kelsey, the keeper. He was
Arsenal
keeper. Ivor Allchurch, the Allchurch brothers were on that as well. So when John Charles got kicked about, I think it was against Hungary. He couldn't play in the semi-final against Brazil, and they should have brought on, so you have a reserve centre forward, don't you? Well, actually, because the committee men and all their wives were on the plane, they didn't have enough room to bring Trevor forward as the reserve centre forward. So we didn't have a centre forward, a proper centre forward. We were playing a false nine. We didn't have a number 9 against Brazil. So that was one of the reasons. We got all this great footage from FIFA of those games, and then you see Ivor Allchurch got a fantastic volley. It was wonderful. I mean, the nation. They always told this story about the World Cup. They came back. Mel Charles got off the train at Swansea High Street with suitcases and stuff, and the All Church Brothers are there as well. And there wasn't that much coverage at the time. It wasn't like Match of the Day on every night. And apparently the station master said, been away on your holidays, boys, have you? They nearly won the World Cup. They could have nearly won the World Cup. So that whole experience, those seeing those videos, those great videos, which we managed to ditch. We didn't use them in the film in the end, but there's some great archive there that people have never seen. They should see at some stage.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not enough people know about Wales's exploits at the 58 World Cup, because I watched the dramatisation of it. It was about Pele's life, and just a bit of artistic license they threw in. They replaced Wales with the Russians.
Did they?
Yeah, just to make it more sort of dramatic. Obviously there's not enough drama in the Welsh football tradition.
Wow.
But Pele always remembers that. Well, of course he remembers that game. He's always been very fond. He's made programs with Gary Slaymaker about it as well, about the day Pele broke our hearts. But you don't forget. You never forget your first time, boys.
Well, very true. My father covered them for Wales for about 45 years and never saw them qualify for a major campaign. And at the same time, he was sort of covering Cardiff City through thin, really. They didn't pull up any trees. And then he retires and Cardiff City end up in the Premiership. And then Wales go and qualify. So we decided my old man was a jinx when he was there.
I mean, that was the lovely thing about the FA Cup final with Gary Lineker, wasn't it? My dad went to 4 cup finals. He never saw them win. I hope he's watching somewhere today.
Yeah.
I love that when people are actually passionate about what they do as well.
Yeah.
Whether you like Leicester City or not, it was a great day.
I didn't see that coming when they wheeled out Engelbert at the end, did you?
One of Leicester's finest.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Wow.
Brilliant.
Number 3 on your list?
Number 3 is sorry, Rod. Swansea versus Nottingham Forest Championship semi-final playoffs at the Liberty Stadium. So we'd come from the Vetch, which was, which smelled of toilets and smoke, and it was just, but it was wonderful, particularly the night matches. You used to walk up a little sort of like incline, and then suddenly the pitch would be there. In August it'd be green, by October it'd be brown, but it was still those magical nights. And the Liberty Stadium we'd gone to seemed a bit antiseptic until this game. Now then, Leon Britton, who was one of my favourite players, scored a fantastic goal. We'd gone to the first semi-final up in Nottingham Forest. Neil Taylor had been sent off in the first 2 or 3 minutes for a high kick. We hang on, could have scored. Nathan Dyer could have put his head, didn't. Came then, and Leon Britton, who was rubbish at scoring goals. I mean, brilliant at everything else, rubbish at scoring goals. He does this fantastic little Cruyff turn, and left foot ball goes into the. It was just, that was wonderful. And then we go to 2-0, I think, and then it's 2-1. Robbie Earnshaw scored a great goal. You're thinking with 10 minutes to go, oh my gosh. And then the keeper comes up, a bit like Alisson, not quite, misses it completely for the last corner of the match for Nottingham Forest. Ball goes over his head. And a guy called Darren Pratley runs to the halfway line and kicks the ball into an empty net. And the stadium shook. And from that moment on, it felt like the home game. But it was just like Brendan Rodgers running up and down the touchline, high-fiving all the supporters. We were all in it together at that stage. We were all quite innocent, I think, about being the Premier League was all going to be about. It was, and we had an incredible belief in ourselves and the team, and in luck and in providence. And it worked out that way. The final itself was great against Reading. But that moment, the stadium became our home. I remember Jason Mohammed, who was there because he was commentating, he said he in the press box he could feel the stadium actually shaking. And you can't buy moments like that, can't you? Even if you're a multi, unless you're Roman Abramovich, but you can't buy those wonderful moments when your home team, do something fantastic, and it's a shared experience, a lifelong memory.
You mentioned Alisson scoring. I mean, I'm sure I've got this right. I'm sure Swansea City had a fabulous. Is it Roger Freestone?
Yeah, Roger Freestone.
Was it penalties, free kicks?
Penalties.
He's got a load, didn't he, Freestone?
He's got a couple of goals of penalties. Yeah. And he's one of the match day hosts at the Liberty now, so I get to get He's like that, again, a nice lad. Hundreds of appearances for Swansea City. And a local legend as well. So yeah.
I've got one other question about Swansea. Sorry, Rod.
Very good.
Who was the Spanish lad that you got? He came from nowhere, and he got about 20 goals in your first season. Michu, that's him.
Oh,
Yeah.
2 against Arsenal, I remember, at the Emirates.
what happened to him?
Exactly.
He burned so
Talk about
brightly.
one season wonder.
Yeah. He went to Napoli, and he had an ankle problem. I mean, they used to call him the student because he used to go around with this little backpack all the time. He obviously, so Brendan Rodgers left, went to Liverpool. Who on earth are you going to get in? You get in Michael Laudrup. Suddenly Michael Laudrup is living in Swansea. I took him once to Klein Golf Club. I was hosting an event for a Klein Golf Club. And, obviously everybody then wants their autograph at the end. I'm feeling a little bit protective about him. So I take him outside, but it's pitch black at Klein Golf Club, just up the road here. And he presses the button in his very smart car. The lights come on. And the car is surrounded by sheep.
What button is that?
It was just...
I think it's a Welsh button. I'm not sure.
Can make a fortune. I just thought to myself, this guy who has played for Barcelona, Real Madrid, and here he is in Swansea with his car. And he can't get into the car because there's a flock of sheep around him. Yeah, me too. It was brilliant. I mean, with the Spanish connection, with started with Roberto, and then Laudrup brought in some more players. And Ankle Wrangle was probably one of the finest.
Ankle Wrangle.
His parents must have had a sense of humour. Mr. and Mrs. Wrangle, what are we going to call him? Oh, it's got to be like...
What do you mean, Mangle and Dangle?
That's his 2 brothers, isn't it?
Yeah, Mangle and Dangle Wrangle.
Oh, God.
Oh, your 4th sporting moment, Mal?
Now what I've got. Wales versus England at Wembley, 1999. And I'm not talking about football. I'm talking about rugby.
Yes.
Remember the game, Rod? Do you remember it?
I remember it well. There was a bit of a sidestep, wasn't there, in that game?
Yeah.
Phil Bennett-esque sidestep, yeah. But it wasn't Phil Bennett. It was the most unlikely person to do a sidestep who's ever done a sidestep, I would say.
He usually went through people rather than around them, didn't he?
That's right, he did. Yeah. Scotty Gibbs.
So I was on a football tour. We were in Holland with Mumbles Rangers, and we played a couple of games in the afternoon, hosted by a lovely Dutch football club, and they had BBC One. So we sat down to watch the game, and if you remember, Rod, the first half, England destroyed sort of Wales. We were just hopeless. I mean, it was awful. And we'd had Tom Jones on singing, and Max, I think, had been on singing beforehand, got the crowd in the ring. And so at halftime, all the dads look at each other and say, should we go back to where we stay in a couple of pints? Dinosaurs. So we get on the team bus back to where we're all staying at some sporting centre. And the texts just start coming in on our phones. And I didn't see the game. I didn't see the game till we got back the next week. But by the end of it, we're on this bus in Holland, cheering our heads off, and Scott Gibbs going to try, which we'd never seen, which is described as world beating. And it was just, you're more Welsh when you're away from home than. I've got to say, guys, I know we're pretty Welsh today.
Oh,
when we're away from home, I tell you what, we're Max Spice with daffodils on as well. That was just a great moment for dads and lads, to be able to share that experience together on the bus, all cheering.
Yeah, I met Scott. We did the Hong Kong Sevens together about 4, 5, 6 years ago, and it was a lovely, lovely fella. And I went there with him and John Bentley, and John Bentley was more of a yeah. He's like that all the time. So every time me and Scott would like. All right, Scott. Yeah. You'd sit the piss out of John Bentley. He's a great lad. Kept himself to himself. Just top bloke.
Hong Kong, you must have loved that. Hong Kong. Yeah. Like I said, John Bentley he never saw daylight. He's just a night owl, Bentos. And Scott was a lovely, lovely fella. Have you played Hong Kong, Rod?
I have. I did the long lunch in Hong Kong, which is the start of the Hong Kong Sevens calendar. And that was a lively event as well. That was in Kowloon, and I think that's where you were, Mal, wasn't it, in Kowloon?
In 87, I played, talking about being Welsh, I played keyboards on Max Boyce's tour of Southeast Asia, or the shopping tour, as we call it.
Definitely getting Welsh.
So it was tomorrow's my birthday, boys. I don't want anything big, just something small.
No, fine.
But in 1987, I celebrated it in Hong Kong with Max. We did a gig at the China Fleet Club, and then it's like one of those days, and you don't want to tell everybody it's my birthday. Oh, well, I've just done it now. I don't. It's my birthday, but I was really quite sad that nobody had said happy birthday to me. And then somebody rang home and they said, "Oh, it's Matt's birthday today." So they tell Max. So we all go out to this little Vietnamese restaurant in Kowloon. You go down these set of stairs, and there's a great big Hammond organ and like hymn sheets. You know, like they've got lots of books with songs in Vietnamese, Chinese or Cantonese, and in English as well. So Eve Graham's on the tour from New Seekers. So I'm the keyboard player. So I'd like to teach the world to sing. Nothing from the audience. Nothing at all. So Max gets up. He undoes his shirt. He's got rather a healthy, hairy chest.
Like Ryan Giggs.
Yeah. He tells everybody he's Tom Jones. We played the green grass of home. And all night, we didn't pay for any beers or chips. Honestly, it was one of those magical nights in Hong Kong. So that was brilliant. But yeah,
the Hammond organ, you said.
Hammond organ.
Yeah, that was somewhat. I tell you what, one of the kids from The Sound of Music, actually.
Nicholas, are you referring to Nicholas Hammond?
Hammond, yeah, he's the man. He made the Hammond organ.
Oh, well done, Nicholas.
Yeah, we thought he hadn't amounted to anything.
No. Yeah, and now look at him.
Oh, that's great. Max Boyce in Kowloon, eh? That's going to be hard to top for you tomorrow when you're sat there with your Asda's calling the caterpillar cake.
Kids will be around. They'll be trying. I'll be just miserable in the corner. I could be back there.
So, your final sporting moment?
Well, I suppose again, a lot of these are childhood memories. George Best. It's the 1968 Manchester United Benfica European Cup final. Obviously, Celtic had won it. It had never been won by an English club, and in those days we didn't make any differences. We do now, Gaz. All right, we do now. in those days we were all in it together. After post-Second World War, we were all in it. But anyway, and it was black and white. And it was just, Eusebio Torres with their centre forward, the big guy. Bobby Charlton scores. And then Brian Kidd, he's 18 years old.
Ex-Arsenal.
Ex-Arsenal, yeah. And then Nobby Stiles at the end. And it was just obviously because of Busby and the Busby Babes and all of that. It was one of those magical moments that made you want to play football, made you want to win the European Cup. Obviously, it didn't happen. But you
talk about nice people. Nobby Stiles is probably the nicest person I've ever met in my life. And they're doing a thing because he died with the dementia, Nobby, and they're doing a thing. You're supposed to dance like Nobby did when he won the World Cup. Socks around your ankles, just do the little black your teeth out. And they're doing something to raise awareness and raise money for footballers that have suffered with dementia through heading the ball.
Yeah.
He was an amazing man, and that's one of that was one of my claims to fame was that Nobby Stiles. The last dinner I did before I went away to get married, we got married in America, and I was chatting with Nobby, and he said, "Have you got much on in the next couple of weeks?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going away to get married in Vegas." He said, "Oh, I'm going to be in Vegas." He said, "In the next few weeks, we're doing a little tour around America." He said, we're stopping in Vegas for a few days. What day you get married? And I told him. Anyway, it was while he was there, and he came along after the wedding, and he came and found us in the hotel. Would you believe? He had no idea. I told him which hotel we were in, but Gaz will bear me out. This is the sort of thing he would have done. And he came along to the hotel with his wife Kay, and he said, "Oh, we're going to find him." And the first person he walked into had a Welsh accent. It was my Auntie Jerry. And he said, "You don't happen to be with the Woodward group?" And she said, "Yeah, it's my next thing. He's out. He's with my father-in-law, with my dad." Imagine the brownie points I had out of that. It was just unbelievable. But then the other thing was, when we arrived in the hotel, there was a bouquet of flowers and some chocolates and champagne that he had sent. Have a great trip. All the best for the wedding. That was before he even knew he was going to see us. So how many people would ever take the trouble?
Some man in money.
Yeah, top man. Top man.
Are footballers just different these days? Is it because of the background, the working class background that those kids came from, and they still had to struggle? I don't know. I don't think
Nobby realised how loved he was.
Yeah.
No.
Well, what a massive name. There's a couple of the lads from the 1966 that didn't like signing autographs. Nobby would sign anything and just be delighted that he was signing for you. He just, I can't speak high enough of him. And I'm big mate of his son John Stiles, who played for Doncaster and Leeds, as you know, Rod. Yeah. Just getting away from this, Ian Parsons has put, as well as making the Hammond organ, Nicholas Hammond played Spider-Man in the TV series from 75 to 77.
Ah, yeah.
I still think he's more famous for making the organ, to be honest with you. But, Well, the 1968 finals, your final sporting moments, and we're moving now on to...
I personally won't be listening to the Gimme 5 podcast because I haven't seen Gimme 1, 2, 3 or 4.
So we're moving now on to your dinner guests. Or alive.
This was tricky. Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King. So I've been very fortunate to spend quite a lot of time in the Deep South. And as one person told me, African Americans have been out of slavery much less time than they were in slavery. So I was actually doing programs about black gospel music and Welsh chapel music, how both communities had used music to find some sort of freedom. And a guy called the Reverend Samuel Billy Kyles, who he was a pastor of a church on South Parkway in Memphis. He'd been born in the Deep South, gone to Chicago with his parents, the Promised Land, as they called it. He'd come back during the Civil Rights era and become a pastor of a church. He'd been arrested for sitting at the front of a bus. The pastors had decided one day they were all going to sit at the front of the bus because you weren't allowed to sit at the front of the bus. Yeah. And he said, I sat at the front of the bus, and the people, African Americans at the back saying, "Come on, man, we're going to be late for work." And he tried to explain. He said, "If we don't sit at the front of the bus, we'll never drive this bus." And years later, I said, "Have things changed?" And he said, "Well, actually, one of the members of my church now is a black man, and he is in charge of the Memphis Transport Association." So there are small changes, but if you ever go to the Deep South, you'll notice that it's not quite as you might hope it would be. Yeah. But he had been responsible, Billy Kyles had been responsible for asking Martin Luther King to come to Memphis in '68 for the garbage workers strike. It wasn't about black and white, it was about garbage workers. And he'd arrived on a plane. It was late because there was a bomb threat from Atlanta to Memphis. The boys had gone out. Jesse Jackson had gone out to doing missionary work around the place. And the night before Martin Luther King was shot, there was a big meeting at the temple in Memphis. They were all supposed to go. He was tired. They sent Ralph Abernathy and Billy Kyles to the actual church. And as they walked in, there was a massive applause from everybody. And then they realized they'd come for Martin. They hadn't come for these guys. So they rang him in the Lorraine Hotel. And that's when he gives this amazing speech. I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I might not get there with you, but one day we will be free. The next day, Billy spends the afternoon with him in the Lorraine Hotel. He rings home to say they're all coming for dinner now because they're all coming to Billy's church for soul food. And then the shot rings out. And Billy Kyles grabs a blanket and wraps up his friend and sees the life draining out of him. He told me that story 3 times. And the reason he said, I tell this story because when everybody asks me is because I'm a witness. He said he wasn't killed by a jealous lover. He was killed for supporting garbage workers. And the whole thing about that era, again, he was painted as being, a nemesis for America. He was bringing America down. It's amazing how the media are able to paint people into different pictures. And then as the years go past, like Muhammad Ali, you get a different picture of them. I would just love to actually ask him about why he did it. His sister says he wasn't a saint. And if you read the literature on the day of his greatest achievement, the being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the week before, FBI had sent him and his wife recordings of him in a bedroom in a hotel room with another woman, threatened to expose him as being an adulterer. She says he wasn't a saint because if you make him out to be a saint, you can't do what he did. And I'd love to sit around the table and ask him about the fears and about why he did it and about why he didn't run away, because I would have. And what gave him the strength, whether it was the spiritual strength, whether it was the strength of his community. So I would love to just chat to Martin Luther King and actually say, well done for what you did. So I'd love to have met him. But in a way, I feel through Billy Cowles, who's sadly no longer with us, he's a man with the nicest nails of any man I've ever seen. Manicured to this, a millimeter of his lives. And on his wall, he had pictures of himself with Bill Clinton and with all these different people. But that was a magic moment, to be told that story by the man who was there.
That's a great start.
Right, Evan Roberts.
Who?
Right, Gaza, Evan Roberts. Who did he play for? He played for Lacha, Calvinistic Methodist Church, 1904. Oh, he was wonderful. So this thing happened, right?
What's he called, this fella?
Evan Roberts. Evan Roberts. 26-year-old ex-miner from Lacha, just outside Swansea. Can you say Lacha?
Lacha.
Lacha, very good.
That's not bad, is it? I've been coaching him.
I got a cold.
Yeah. Can you just clean your mic, your camera? Cover it. That's better. So Evan was a 26-year-old ex-miner. He believed that he'd met God in his bedroom every night for 3 months, man to man, face to face. And he could actually, it was a bed and breakfast. So you could actually go and stay in the room that he met God for 3 months. He told his family and friends they thought he was nuts. He thought that God had, he said that God had given him a commission to lead a worldwide religious revival from Lacha.
Yeah.
18 months later, Wales had been converted to within an inch of its life. Rugby teams had been disbanded. If you go to some of the rugby clubs now, for 1905, 1906 seasons, they just got WR. It's not Welsh Rugby, it's Welsh Revival. Wales became a very different place, became very religious. And like real religious, they used to, it wasn't just a formality. Although some people would still play rugby, still box, under different assumed names, just in case they got found out. After 18 months, he went to Liverpool. He said the revival won't come to Liverpool because there are people here who are actively working against the Lord. And he said, they're all sat behind me on the stage. And behind him were all the ministers from Liverpool. And he had a breakdown and he never spoke again in public. Now, again, I would just love to find out. I wrote a musical about him. So I've read an awful lot about him, what other people had talked about him. But I would like to speak to him about what it was like. He took this group of teenage girls called the Singers of Dawn, 6 of them. All teenagers. I mean, you can imagine how now that would be scandalous. In 1904, when women had no voice, they used to lead the prayer meetings. And his big nemesis was a guy called the Reverend Peter Price from Dowlais, who said, this is a sham revival. He says, why does the Holy Spirit only come down after midnight? There are women speaking there, and of course the women say, oh, but he does have lovely eyes. They accused him of all sorts of things. And then he disappeared. He disappeared from public view. And he actually ended up living in Rubina on his own. Never got married or anything. But I would just love to find out on the inside, because he never saw the revival actually went all around the world. To India, China, and America. Those American revivals trace their roots. Billy Graham and all that trace their roots to Evan Roberts in Lacha. So there we are.
I believe that God was there in that bed and breakfast, because apparently the following morning when he went down for breakfast, he asked for more orange juice and the landlady gave it to him. So only God can do a miracle like that.
That's a miracle. It started off as water. Do it yourself, she said.
They're so stingy with that orange juice, aren't they? Why do they give you such tiny cups in these places?
Right, do you want the next one?
Yes, please.
Tommy Farr.
Oh, the Welsh boxer.
Sorry about this, guys. I'll bring you into it somewhere along the line now.
But there's a musical theme here. You just mentioned musical, right? And I know you wrote a musical about Tommy Farr because I've seen it, The Contender.
Oh, right. Mike Doyle played Tommy Farr. Now, Tommy Farr was an incredible guy. He brought up bare knuckle fighting in the Rhondda. His father was a bare knuckle fighter, and they used to do these things called the holes with the pit boys. They used to dig 2 holes, right, and put the pit boys in 1 hole each, a couple of feet apart, and then they'd only let them out after one had knocked the other one out. And he used to bet on them, like cockfighting. He went through that. He went through the boxing booths, but he became this. He was like, he was in Madame Tussauds. He made records. He played the London Palladium. He toured with a group of singing miners. But he lost it all. He lost everything. And one of my early jobs when I came back from London was as a researcher on a radio program, and I rang him up once and said, it must have been one of the big fights we were on. I said, Mr. Farr, we'd like you to talk about this fight coming up. And he just said to me, how much? And I went, I don't know, sir. And he went, boy, find out how much and call me back. And at the time I was quite shocked because nobody ever asked how much the fee was for BBC Radio Wales. But he'd lost everything, and he must have been a millionaire because when he went to New York, he fought against Joe Louis at the Yankee Stadium. I can't remember, 40,000 people. So it was the first transatlantic radio broadcast. But he didn't. His trainer was a guy called Joby Churchill. Joby Churchill was a one-legged saddler from Tonnapandi.
This sounds like another cartoon, this.
He had his leg pulled off. He had his leg, but he was a boxing trainer, and he was like his mentor. But of course, when Tommy went to America, he had his head turned. And this, I'm not sure how much time we got. I went to the thing in a prison, and I'm telling stories and playing songs, and I turn around to the pastor who's looking after me and say, I'm sorry, I'm rambling on a bit here. How long have we got? And the guy said, don't worry. They've all got 6 months. Tommy Farr was, he went across on a ship to America. I think it was Queen Mary. And on that ship, he met this beautiful lady. And anyway, they went across, and she became his sort of fiancée for a while. And anyway, years later, Randolph Turpin, Mr. B, was it Sugar Ray Robinson? Surprisingly beat him. But of course, there was always going to be a return fight if you beat the champion. And that was going to be back in America. And Orig Williams, El Bandido, the wrestler from Rill, rang me up when he knew I was writing this musical. And he said, Mal, I was training with Randolph Turpin, and the phone rang. And he picked up the phone, and it was Tommy Farr. And he said, can I speak to Randolph Turpin? So he wanted to speak to Randolph, and he said, how are you going to go to America? He said, we're going by boat. He said, go by plane. He said, if you go by boat, you will meet a beautiful woman. She will seduce you. And what you won't know is that she's owned by the mafia. And, of course, Randolph Turpin went across on a boat with a beautiful woman. And of course, when you put that story together, which Orig Williams had no idea that when Tommy Farr went across, that he met this beautiful woman who's introduced by a very, very high-profile American. And the whole thing that he went through out in America, and he stayed out there. I mean, he was a celebrity. He was, he was at Jack Dempsey's bar most nights. His lovely pictures online, but he lost it all. But that tenacity to come back again, and he did. He tried to make a comeback, and he made some money, and he was a pundit. And years later, he was a pundit, and he made his money that way. But he'd done it all, and he's a great character.
I've got the book for you to read, Gaz. Thus Far, it's a great biography, isn't it?
Yeah,
Tommy Farr's book. You would have read that, Mal.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
2 to go then, Mal.
Yeah, 2 to go. Dorothy Squires.
Dorothy Squires. There was a family friend of ours called John Lloyd who used to manage Dorothy Squires in a sort of later part of her career. But people forget what an absolute legend she was. You think of her as a big Welsh star, but she was a huge star, wasn't she?
Yeah, I've been doing quite a lot lately with this lad called Johnny Tudor, a podcast. And so Dorothy Squires came from Llanelli, came from a travelling family, forced her way to the top. Apparently in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, she was the biggest grossing British star, doing tours, London Palladium, stuff like that. She met this young man who came along to one of her parties. She had legendary parties in Bexhill at a mansion, 28-bedroom mansion. This young man came along by mistake. His name was Roger Moore. Wow. Good-looking lad, did cardigan adverts. And apparently that night he swept her up, carried her up the stairs like Gone with the Wind, and he never left. Well, not until he left. But she put her own career on hold and put everything into Roger Moore and made him into this, a star, Ivanhoe and all of that. And then he left her. And he came back to collect his gear. He'd met this lady in Yugoslavia and a beautiful woman. And so he came back to collect his gear, and she ended up throwing the suitcase at him and almost breaking his nose. And then she went around to his house where he was living with this woman, and she broke every window. and apparently he looked down and she'd cut her hand on the glass, and he says, Dot, your hand's bleeding. She says, not my hand, it's bleeding, it's my heart. But again, she lost it all. Ended up living in a terraced house, a fan that owned in Trebanog, I think it was. And and we forget our heroes.
Penniless, isn't she?
Yeah, and I think we're pretty bad at that. I mean, I know I'm bigging them all up, guys, here in about these Welsh people, but we're pretty bad at it in this part of the world in remembering how brilliant some of our heroes are. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're a bit better with that, with the Gooners and stuff, with the looking after your legends and maybe creating that myth and aura around them as well.
Well, I'm pretty sure my dad worked with Dorothy Squires at the Palladium. I went out into the garage I've got all the old posters that he had, and I couldn't find it, but I'm pretty certain he worked with Dorothy Squires on either a Palladium or a summer season type thing.
Yeah, she was enormous and worked incredibly hard. I was just sent a video of her. Bruce Forsyth was doing a charity event with Billy Smart Circus, and she sang in this cage full of tigers. It's got her going in and singing.
I've done gigs like that myself.
But yeah, she done
up about gigs.
Yeah. Yeah, remember those? Oh, sorry. Yeah, hairy gig. We've done a lot of hairy gigs in our time as well.
That's Squires, great shout, and it's. I like the fact that she happens to be Welsh as well.
Yeah.
I didn't realise she was a traveller because one of her songs was it Gypsy Woman or something like that? Or was it?
Yes, that's right. One of her first big.
I didn't realise she was a traveller. Right.
And she wrote a lot of songs which people don't give her credit for. She wrote some songs like one of the Tammy in Love songs, for the film Tammy songs. And
did she?
Yeah, she was a great writer.
Oh, We Clowns, says Ian Parsons. We Clowns. That's one of his favourites. Anyway, one of Ian's favourite Dorothy Squires songs.
Sure, you're not talking about
Nicholas Hammond. He wrote that, didn't he?
I'm sure he backed her.
Nicholas Hammond got a Spanish cap as well, evidently.
That was Nicholas Hamondo.
Well, your final dinner guest, Mal?
Richard Burton. To begin.
I love it.
He comes from right. Now, he didn't come from Pontypandy. He came from Pontrhy de Fen. Guys, try and look interested now.
Pontrhy
de Fen, the same village as that other great orator, my dad.
Oh, right.
So Richard Burton, working class lad, had it all. It's like the George Best in the story, isn't it? Yeah. Where did it all go wrong, George? After he's just spent the night with Miss World, there's somebody.
That's why Gaz was looking all consumed then when he turned away. He was trying to spell Pontrhy de Fen because he makes a note of all these things.
I've written everything down, you see. I've written everything down. That's what if you're thinking, what's he doing there?
He's got a lot of words without vowels in there. You've got a lot of words without vowels in, Gaz, today.
Yeah.
couple of Y's, couple of double D's, you'd be fine. Yeah. And again, and they said the thing about him, he was, he could have been Laurence Olivier, he could have been this, he could have been that. And he threw it all away for a career in Hollywood, where he bought the biggest diamond and, Liz Taylor married her twice. There's a guy called Guy Masterson, who is an actor, and he was his nephew, and he tells this great story about Richard wants to take his Mini Cooper back to Switzerland, and I think he's got a bit of a bad leg or something, so he asks if Guy will go with him as well. So Guy and his girlfriend at the time get a Mini Cooper in Britain, and they drive across Europe to Switzerland to the house, and it's just the stories along that journey and about how people, if you stop in a little village in France, because he's a worldwide star, everybody knew Richard Burton. How he stopped and bought them both Rolex watches. How about just how they're asked up onto the bridge of the ship when they're going across. But he just says his Uncle Rich, as he called him, just loved reading books. Wanted to be he would have, in many ways, might have preferred to have been Dylan Thomas rather than Laurence Olivier, and how lightly he wore his talent. But what a life! What a life! Absolute wonderful life to have made all those films and to have been such a major star, and married to Liz Taylor twice. Goodness me!
That would be some dinner party, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just to recap on some of those guys.
Yeah, well, obviously now we've got a new. So we're doing a table of the dinner guests because everyone picks the dinner guests. So we've now got a new leader that most people have picked, and it's Evan Roberts. He's now the eighth time he's been selected. Wherever he's from. So we've got Elton John, Randy Newman, the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, Dusty Springfield, the Bond films, The Bourne, Identity, Die Hard, A Lethal Weapon, The Godfather, It's a Wonderful Life, my favourite, The Sound of Music, of course, Nicholas Hammond's finest moment.
Nice.
The footballers, Pele, George Best, Johan Cruyff, Alan Curtis, and the Charles brothers. Sporting moments, Swansea against Northampton Town, the first match Mal ever went to. Wales v Brazil. Swansea against Nottingham Forest, the first game at the Liberty. Wales v England and Scotty Gibbs' little sidestep. And the 1968 European Cup final, Manchester United, Benfica. His dinner guests, obviously, the Llanelli legend, Martin Luther King, Evan Roberts, Tommy Barr, Dorothy Squires, Richard Burton. Brilliant.
Fantastic. A veritable feast of a list, and argued, if I might say, with such charm and eloquency, Mal, that it's very hard to go against any of those choices, even when you told me about the Liberty Stadium rocking. And we have that in Cardiff, but it's more down to dodgy builders, I think. It's been an absolute delight to have you on, and thank you so much for shedding the light on some of your guilty pleasures and little secrets there. Thank you so much.
Right,
yeah, thank you very much. And of course, I've got you for your birthday a signed Mel Charles piece. I can't find it anywhere, but I'll get it.
Thank you very much. All the best of the podcast, boys.
And all the best with everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Cheers, Mel. God bless you, mate.
I think Give Me Five would be my favourite podcast. If I only listened to a podcast.
And Maldwin has left the building. What a force of nature. And what a guy, Gaz.
Lovely. Never met him before. Really enjoyed that. Really. What a lovely bloke he is, by the way.
Yeah, and you were getting educated on all things Welsh. Lacher? You never thought you'd get to hear about Lacher, did you?
Lacher? That was what the Scouse woman puts on her hair. Lacher. Get that Lacher on there, la.
And the other great thing is, when our producer Ian Parsons approached him about coming on the show, he didn't turn around and say, find out what the fee is and then come back to me. Because we might have missed out on all of that.
We'd have missed out on a lot.
We would have. And didn't I bet you when this show started that I'd be able to get the Pope on the show?
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And so I went to Ian and I said, get him on. And Ian worked his magic, and the rest is geography, as they say.
You know my favourite Pope? Pope Sicola. He's my favourite Pope.
Pope Sicola.
He lives him.
Well, that was another installation of the Gimme 5 podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you're playing the home game, we'll be back with a lot more, but until then, this has been a Tis Done production at the hands of Ian Parsons. So if you want to blame anyone, you can blame him. From Bessacar and Gary Marshall and my good self, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Well said. Nanu.
Thank you.